What's up, Internet? 2020 is finally done. And we can all breathe a sigh of relief, because things can only get better. One hopes. But what's really weird is, as objectively, broadly speaking, awful as this past year has been, I really haven't played all that many terrible games. Like, at most of them are just a resounding meh. You know? Which is good in the broad sense that it means that there's less horrible things to play, at least in my experience. It's less good when you have a series pointing out the worst games you played this year. Because there really wasn't all that much that was just well and truly objectively awful. Okay, well, there was one. The big one. We all know which one, and I will bring that one up, don't worry, that one will be talked about. But I think this year it's more going to be a list of the games I played this year that were mostly just disappointing for what it was, instead of just truly objectively the worst thing ever. Although, it gets to that level, trust me, on that one. But either way, this is the top 10 poop games of 2020. Now, before we begin, of course, I have to acknowledge the Golden Lagoon Award winners of the year. Look at that, I even made a little graphic. It's almost like I'm getting somewhat mildly competent at this. These are, of course, the games that are deeply, deeply flawed and, in a lot of respects, bad, and yet I couldn't stop playing them. They might actually be enjoyable games that are just really well and deeply flawed. Anyway, Golden Lagoon Award winner the first goes to Greedfall. A game with some of the most bland story ever, seriously. Avatar, Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans, Fern Gully, Pocahontas. You ever see any one of those stories? You know what's going on here, and yet, it's like the characters were written by a completely different group because they're really deep and intricate and multifaceted and interesting. So what the hell happened to the overarching story? When I reviewed this game, longtime subscriber over Million with 2N used the term Eurojank to refer to this game. I like that. Eurojank is really the best way to describe this game. It is a game that has a lot of effort put into it, some of it, you know, misplaced perhaps, but it is really wildly janky. If you look at some of the animations, some stuff just doesn't interact properly. I remember trying to cross a log and my character just sort of jittered in place. Do not ever look at the capes in this game, because it will infuriate you, or indeed even the mouths when characters speak, because while their faces are quite nice, they just look so weird and wrong. Combat is really wildly one note, and if you don't play with guns, you are in for a bad time. And yet, this game is a lot of fun. It has a great setting in the sort of age of exploration, in a time where there is some sort of like sci-fi mystical element sort of going on, which means that you can see some actual fantasy stuff in here, and I honestly wish the game leaned into that a lot more. But either way, Greedfall is a fun game for exploration, and it's one of those sort of great B-grade RPGs. If you can find this game on sale for like $10, $15, if you love these kind of games, you'll find some fun here. Honestly, I just wish the developers had a bigger budget and maybe a little bit more experience, because it feels like this game's ambition kind of outstripped its skill, but it's still a lot of fun. Golden Lagoon Award winner number B goes to Evil Zone on the PS1. Forget your BlazBlues, forget your Guilty Gears, forget your Persona fighting games, forget even your Dragon Ball FighterZ. This is well and truly the most anime fighting game I've ever seen. It is completely wonky, it has like a one-button control scheme, and yet it does a lot with it. There are crazy scripted sort of like mega attacks that feel incredibly anime. It has really awkward, janky voice acting that feels just almost intentionally supposed to be like over the top and just bad. It has amazingly camp characters and really, really interesting interactions, and I have to admit I'm well and truly impressed with how this game creates some really intricate interactions with their character models. And even just playing this now for footage here, I couldn't stop laughing at how incredibly goofy this game is. I'm not going to say it's the best 3D fighting game on the PS1, because I think that will probably be forever a ball of burn. But damn if Evil Zone isn't anime, and damn if it's not really, really fun. If you can get past the fact it has the Titus logo on it, I think you should try and find a copy of Evil Zone if you want to see some really fun, goofy, awkward fighting games, because this one, it's one not to miss out on. Now, continuing with the actual list of the 10 poop games of 2020, starting off with number 10, we have Neo Geo Battle Colosseum on the PS2. An amalgamation of pretty much every SNK fighting game thrown together, along with mascots from all sorts of different series, including the guy from Metal Slug. How is this game on this list? Well, let me tell you. At the very least, the PS2 version has a bit of a control quirk that just makes playing this kinda unpleasant. See, this is an arcade fighting game on the PS2 that exclusively only uses the D-pad. And maybe I'm being a baby about this, but let me tell you, just recording footage for this segment, my thumb was hurting just trying to pull off any special abilities. Like, I am awful at these games, but having to fight the controls because they're just so clumsy and not really smooth and comfortable to control does not help. Which is a shame because conceptually this game is a lot of fun. It actually has some pretty deep systems, and it has some really cool stage designs, and I love the roster. It's just, why is it that this game defaults to the D-pad, and why can I not use the control stick? And seriously, was this designed with the PS1 in mind? Because if it weren't for that one thing, this game would be awesome, but as it stands, it's almost just sort of painful and uncomfortable to play just because of how the controller's designed. That said, there was a version on the Xbox 360. I'm betting that doesn't use that D-pad because that would be even worse. So, maybe try that version. I don't know. Moving on to number 9, we have Code Vein, a game I was super excited about. I have a soft spot in my heart for Souls-style games. I mean, right now I'm even going back and playing the original Demon Souls. Don't even have a PS5, just playing the original. It's good. And despite what Namco Bandai wants you to believe with their marketing arm, it's not a game that's designed to be hard. And I think this game takes that to heart because it's the easiest one ever, but that's not what my problem with this game is. This game has some really cool features. For one thing, it's got a really great character creator. I absolutely loved making my own custom character in this. What I didn't like so much was how linear this game was. For one thing, they even show that they're open to non-linear design. There's an area early on where you can take a secondary kind of obscured, awkward path to get somewhere else, and it's actually really rewarding to go that way. And then it just sort of funnels you down a line. That kind of sucked. But what sucks even more is the fact that there's like 4 weapons in this game. Oh, don't get me wrong, there's actually probably about 20 or so, but they fall into 4 different weapon types, and they all behave exactly 100% identically, which really limits your combat options. If you don't like any of the 4 weapons in this game, you're gonna have a hard time. It's kind of why I dislike Sekiro so much. You only had 1 weapon in that game too, but you know, that isn't even what I disliked about this game. I didn't care for the fact that there wasn't a lot of combat options. I didn't care for how linear it was. I didn't care how dumb the plot was, despite the fact they actually give your character a backstory that's really cool. But you know what? I could put up with all that, as long as the game continued to at least be marginally entertaining. That was until about halfway through, and I got into this weird maze that was all identical and all one color. And I'm not just bitter that my character blended into the walls or anything, it was just a really awkwardly designed environment that was way too big, way too twisty path, and way too much of a maze that had no reason to explore it. It was just a big, awkward, white maze of nothing, and the end result was not terribly fun, and the bosses aren't very enjoyable either. Ultimately, I gave up completing this game at Diet Ornstein and Smaw, because, I mean, I could play better knockoff Souls games like The Surge again, or Lords of the Fallen, or Sekiro, or, you know, once again, just go back and play Demon Souls. This game, if you can find it on sale, maybe try it, but don't pay too much for it because it's honestly not that fantastic. It doesn't really do all that much interesting other than its character creation, and its story is just kind of worthless. Speaking of worthless stories, oh look, it's number 8. Borderlands 3! Yeah, this will probably piss some people off. Honestly, this game is exactly 100% everything I expected it to be. It's basically more Borderlands, and that has never really gelled with me, honestly. This game is not good. It's a bland multiplayer shooter that if you're into that thing, well, you'll have some fun with this. But honestly, I would say it's less than the previous iterations. At least the second one had an interesting villain that was fun to interact with. In this one, the villain is live streamers? Should I take offense to that? Genuine question. Should I take offense to that? I feel like I should. Either way, they're not interesting villains. At the very least, they had multiple environments to explore this time, so that's a big step forward. And I do care about the fact that they actually give every character sort of multiple class options. That's pretty cool. But I mean, this game is basically the embodiment of everything that has been wrong with this series from the start. Vehicles control like absolute garbage. Still, like 10 years after the series started, we still can't figure out vehicles. What's up with that? Enemies still feel all basically identical, even though it does feel like we're getting at least a little bit closer to having a nice, decent number of different types of things to fight. Weapons are all piss weak, seriously. I think that's inherent to it trying to be an RPG as well, more than it just being really crap weapons, but the weapons really don't feel all that great. And ultimately, I think this is a game that basically just sits around and tries to revel in internet and meme humor, which means it's gonna feel dated pretty much the moment it sells. And yeah, that didn't do it for me. Ultimately, this game is kind of the embodiment of everything I expected from the series. I at least enjoyed the second game because at least it had an interesting villain. This game doesn't even have that. It just sort of revels in its bad humor that isn't even really funny. And the saddest thing of all is my introduction to this game was a bunch of people telling me how awesome it was because, like, weapons now have, like, secondary specialties and stuff, and it's like, yeah, there's, like, 3 of them, all plastered on weapons that already existed in the series. This game ain't good. It's at best a giant time killer, and at worst, a waste of your time. Speaking of a thing that was an absolute waste, we move on to number 7, which is Power Up Heroes on the Xbox 360. Well, sort of. Power Up Heroes is actually more of a vector for me to vent my anger at GameStop, more than at this individual game. See, I got this in a little disc sleeve, like you do, from one of their sales for like 5 games for $5. And I was excited because it was a game I never heard of. Well, guess what? Their little fancy GameStop sticker kind of covered the entire part of the game disc that hinted that it was, in fact, a Kinect game. You know, a thing I can't play, and to be fair, a thing no one would want to play, and seriously, I almost feel like this was falsely advertised to me at this point. If we're just gonna yell at Power Up Heroes, it's a Kinect game. It's the worst thing ever. Shame on you, Ubisoft. I mean, worst case scenario, I spent $1 and got a drink coaster, I guess? But yeah, not great. Number 6 is a game that kind of surprised me, honestly. Dreams on the PS4, a game made by the guys and gals at Media Molecule who made Little Big Planets, and it has pretty much all the problems I expected from that kind of game. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I am not the biggest fan of user-created content games. While I do firmly believe that everyone has the creative spark in them, and I appreciate any game that's willing to go out of its way to sort of embrace that and give them the tools to express that, not every person is a game designer. In fact, you go to school for many years to do that. I should know. I have. I've spent many years studying game design and making games. So when you give pretty much everyone the ability to go out and publish stuff, you usually do get some cool stuff. But it's usually drowned in a giant ocean of terrible things. I mean, just go look at Little Big Planet. For every one good game you're gonna find in there, it's for like every billion almost unplayable things that exist. So yeah, it's not great. But you know what's an even bigger problem for this game? The fact that basically no one's making stuff for it. Like, seriously, I've logged on several different days and it feels like there just isn't all that much new at any period of time. And indeed, the circumstances under which I got my copy was at a GameStop that was literally just trying to give them away. Seriously, I don't think too many people are playing this, and who knows, maybe they're just waiting for like the big PS5 update for the 2 people who have a PS5 out there. But, you know, this game feels like it doesn't have all that much content, it doesn't have much quality content, and while there are a few little fun things here and there, it's just not worth the cost. If you want to go play Dreams right now, go play the demo, because the demo gives you access to a highly curated selection of created content that's actually good, and you get it for free. That was actually why I got this, is because I enjoyed the demo so much. I thought, hey, there's going to be even more of this awesome content out there, and it really felt like it didn't have that. So just go play the demo, get your experience for free. If you can find it on sale, maybe, but ultimately I can't recommend this one. Moving on to number 5, one that will probably surprise a lot of people, we have Animal Crossing New Horizons. You know me, I'm a big fan of Animal Crossing, but this game is really, really bad. First of all, it's not feature complete, which is kind of a problem. Second of all, it just feels like it lacks content compared to even the earliest iterations of this series. And I'm not just talking about the fact that NES games aren't available in this. I mean, given Nintendo's stance on virtual console stuff, that ship has long since sailed, which is part of the reason why the GameCube one is still the best one in the series, but really, this game doesn't have all that much content compared to previous iterations. Like, yeah, sure, you can modify your environment, which is a genuinely great addition to the tool set this game gives you to experience this world, but where are the gyroids? Where on earth is the coffee shop? Why is it we have so many vendors that could just coalesce into a greater department store instead of having two small little shops and then just a bunch of occasionally show up random vagabonds who will sell you stuff? Where's Wendell and Gracie? Where's Booker and Copper? There are just so many things in previous games that aren't here, and it's really, really weird and bizarre that that's the case. But you know what really baffles me and pisses me off about this game? Clearly there was a lot of work and passion put into this. Case in point, anything you step on, anything, be it grass, pavement, manhole covers, sand, what have you, depending on what you step on and depending on your shoe type, you will actually create different sound effects for walking. Some fully different sound effects just for every combination of footwear and surface you could be walking on. Every animal has it in their dialogue to actually refer to their own species. Every single different animal species has a different type of footprint they leave in the sand. People clearly put a lot of effort into this. Why the hell are the special events in this game so broadly awful? I mean, anyone who's played this game, Bunny Day. You know that chill you just felt down your spine? Yeah, that's a great example of how this game completely cocked up. Seriously, the special events in this game are supposed to break down and sort of get you away from the drudgery and the monotony. In this game, they are the monotony. You want to get rid of the special events so that you can just have your random wander around, talk to a few people, and you're done sort of day, as opposed to everything you do giving you an egg, or having to go to a random island to take another photo of a pair of alpacas who will give you gems, but they won't take too many a day, but they won't tell you that, so you've got an entire shelf of gems you can't do anything with because they only accept 5 commissions a day. Not that I'm that kind of person who held onto those gems just to claim them all in the last day. No, not me. Not at all. This game is awful. And it needs a complete and total overhaul. It needs to have more content, it needs to fix its shops, it needs to add stuff so that it can catch up even to the earliest iterations of this series. It's pretty, yeah, and I like that I can make my own island my way. There is a charm to that, although there is a certain charm to wandering around a pre-designed area that you have no control over as well. But the fact is, it just feels like they half-assed so much content here, and that it's just unfinished and they want to fix it later. And for that, I cannot recommend this game. But that's not the only Switch game on this list, oh no, because next we have Paper Mario, the Origami King. Now, full disclosure, I have not kept up with the Paper Mario series. I played the first two and a little bit of the Wii one, and I pulled the eject lever at that point because I didn't like that it wasn't an RPG. Well, still not an RPG. Now it's a really, really weird puzzle game where you can either succeed at a puzzle or waste 3 turns and then get the success handed to you anyway. Except with bosses, which are awful. Bosses are entirely scripted events where you have to do certain things in exact specific order that the game will not tell you what that order is, but you're expected to do it, and if you don't do it just right, the game will chastise you for being an idiot and getting the order of set specific events to defeat this boss wrong, even though you have no exact idea what you're supposed to do in the first place. And that's before this whole sliding tile environment turns into actual puzzles. But hey, you know, if you don't like that, that's fine. Just pay your way out of any fight. Because you can do that here, for reasons. And it's really like the only use for money in this game, because outside of giant arbitrary costs that literally lock this story behind them, there is no reason to get money. Which is a problem, because that's the only thing you get from fights. So there's basically no reason to go into fights now. Yay. You know what really sucks? This game is beautiful. The writing is fantastically on point, and it feels like the people who actually cared about this game. It just feels like the people who cared about this game were crushed under the weight of, I don't know, Shigeru Miyamoto, who doesn't want new characters and new concepts and creativity in his Nintendo games anymore. You remember that Bob-omb that everyone went crazy for named Bobby? No, you don't! Because his name isn't Bobby, his name is Bob-omb. He is a generic Bob-omb like every other Bob-omb, and he just follows you for a little bit. The only reason they call him Bobby is because one of the characters forgets his name, and all he does is stand next to you in combat and faceplant sometimes. but he certainly does look good. For promotional material, hey, we got partners back. This is totally a Paper Mario game. No, it's just a game where Mario happens to be paper. As that would entail, it certainly is flat. Speaking of games that fell pretty flat for me, we have number 3, Forager. Although I have to admit, this game did get an update recently. I actually, after recording this, sat down and played a lot more. It at least added something of an end game in a giant dungeon boss gauntlet thing. That's actually kind of cool. But what isn't cool is the fact that this game costs like $25–30, and it's a glorified clicker. And I don't like that. And the thing is, it doesn't start out that way. It starts off as an adventure where you have to accumulate a few resources and build the world around you and explore somewhat obtuse puzzles to try and solve them to get new equipment and things to make your adventure a little bit easier and more fun. But then very quickly it just sort of becomes a game about amassing resources for the sake of being able to amass resources and not for any greater purpose. And that's the thing, once you gain the ability to get the game to just amass resources for you, you're done, because the game's gonna do it for you, and it'll be a hell of a lot more efficient at it than you could ever be. And like all clicker games, it's more about not playing it. It's all about making the game play itself for you. And maybe this is just me, but I did not spend my hard-earned money on a video game to watch it play with itself. And it's a game that starts out with such an interesting high concept that really should be in a game that doesn't just devolve into a game that's designed to not be played. And that's frustrating. And it sucks that I don't like the end result of this, especially because it starts out on such a high promise. I'm hoping at the very least the developer can take this premise and apply it to a new game in the future, preferably one that doesn't devolve into a weird, bad clicker. Because a game where you amass resources and build a world around you as you explore it and solve its mysteries to gain new abilities and stuff, there is something there. That is not a bad concept. That is a great concept, and I would love to see it fleshed out further. But here, it just feels like the developer kind of threw up their arms and gave up on that idea halfway through, and that's a damn shame. Moving on to a game that bored me to tears, we have number 2, Crystar. You know, in middle school, we all knew that kid. That one kid who was trying to be so dark and edgy and brooding and whatever just to seem cool and hip and with it. And they just were so incredibly emo, they were just embarrassing to interact with. We all knew that kid. Crystar is if that kid was a video game. Seriously, this is a game where you run around hunting down tortured souls to kill them and then get completely haunted by their past traumas, to cry, to make tears into your weapons because your sadness is your greatest strength. The edge in this game hurts. It really does. It feels like it wants to be taken so seriously, and when I wasn't completely bored with it, I was laughing. Seriously, this game is just goofy and hilarious, and it just wants to be taken seriously, and I can't. And at the end of the day, outside of that initial premise, all you've got is a bog standard beat-em-up dungeon crawler with like maybe a dozen enemies and like 2 attacks. It's a very, very boring game. It's a bland game, but it has an amazing aesthetic. Seriously, the dungeons in this game are great. It's just literally everything else about it is just so embarrassingly bad. And the concept is just so laughable. I would avoid this one at all costs. And then, of course, we have number 1, the big one, the most poop game of 2020. We all know what this one is. It's Elemental Knights R2 Switch, whatever you want to call this thing. You know, this game makes me legitimately mad to think about, and I'm a pretty emotionally reserved individual. This game makes me mad. I can only think of maybe 2 other games that make me more angry than this one. It's an Android phone MMORPG on the Switch, a game you could get for free on your phone that for the Switch version costs $30. Granted, some people have bought it for $1. That's probably not going to happen much more because those cheap deals were made to put this thing on a bestseller list, which Nintendo has now tweaked the rules. So I'm betting the best you're ever going to see this price at again is like $2. That's $2 way too much for this game though. It is garbage. It is one of the most incompetently translated things I've ever seen, in that it doesn't look like it was ever properly translated. I think Google Translate could have done a better job, which is sad. It has numerous features that are just gutted or don't work. I remember the Quest board being said it wasn't available for this device. Interesting, but you know what does work? The gacha microtransaction elements. Yeah! That's the one thing we wanted in this. horrible crap fest we paid potentially $30 goddamn for. We wanted that. We wanted to spend more money to make our characters look poncier. And what's better? Every one of those microtransaction pieces of equipment, they give you stats, so it's officially pay to win. And what's better? You have to upgrade them. You want to know how you do that? Well, guess what? You gotta use other microtransaction clothing as fodder to upgrade your equipped microtransaction crap. Oh, it's a giant pit of horrible microtransaction garbage to give you stats in the most bog standard, boring, lukewarm, poorly translated MMOs I have ever seen, and I have played literally thousands of MMOs in my time. And you know what's best about this game? It has a control scheme that literally divides the audience for this game. Like, you know, I personally don't witness too many people playing handheld mode. Since I made my review, quite a few people have mentioned they love their Switch in handheld mode. All the more power to you, Godspeed. I'm someone who uses it exclusively as a console, and this game is basically unplayable. See, like I said, this is a phone game. It's designed to be controlled basically entirely by touch to scroll through items and swipe and like tap and whatever to select whatever you need. Yeah, for consoles, it's not really made for that. In fact, it has this insulting screen that tells you basically, hey, you gotta play this entirely in handheld mode, which is kind of tricky to record off of, in that it's impossible to record off of. Yeah, you can do it in console mode, but to do that you have to hold down a button to create a fake, sort of like emulated finger for swiping, and it just controls like absolute shit to do this. Going through inventory stuff, I didn't do it to record this. Go see my review. I showed like not even a quarter of the amount of effort it took to sell half the crap in my inventory, and it took an absurd amount of time to do that. Seriously, go watch that video and just see how long it takes to sell all the crap you don't want to hold on to. The game kind of just dumps in your lap. This game is just awful in all regards, and it has no right to be on something that's remotely console based. And of course, just designing it to exclude the people who play it as a console already seems like a fundamentally bad idea. The same could be said if this was made entirely for the console mode and unable to be played in handheld mode. That would be awful. I'm not just saying that because it happens to completely interfere with the way I have to play this in order to record it. It's literally just an awful idea to basically invalidate one entire half of the way to play this console. This entire thing feels awful and cheap and poorly made and just a giant cynical greedy cash in to make whatever money the developers could off you. And it is like just the most slimy, disgusting thing I think I've ever seen. Certainly on this console. And this is a console that has like the cheapest Unity asset flip in its store right now. Seriously, what the hell is Nintendo doing with its storefront? This game is one of the most frustrating things I have ever seen. I have no idea how they had the gall to charge $30 for a Switch version for a game they were giving away for free to begin with, which still seems way too expensive for this game, and it's peppered with microtransactions that basically give you an edge. And it's all packed on top of a barely functioning MMO that is, at best, poorly localized, and that's when it can be bothered to be localized. Trust me, there's still plenty of Japanese in here that hasn't been translated properly, or at all. Bravo, people. This is the worst thing I've seen on the Switch, and this is one of the most frustrating things I've ever seen. And it just makes me sick to think about this thing. So congratulations, Element Knights R, Elemental Knights 2, whatever the hell your title was. You are the biggest, most incompetent piece of shit I have ever seen on the Switch. One of the worst things I have seen in probably all my years doing this, with maybe one exception. This is the most poop game of 2020. A garbage awful year with, well, let's just be honest, one incredibly garbage awful game. But that's where you come in. I want to hear about all the terrible games you've played over this past year so that I know to avoid them. Except it's my job to talk about them, so that probably won't happen. But either way, that's what the comments section is for, so leave your comments down below like you do. And if you want to see more stuff, subscribe to the show like you do. And, you know, if you want to help me out, check out the show's PayPal or Patreon. Support me any way you can so that I can continue to waste my money on terrible, terrible games so you don't have to, because this thing is awful. Ignore this thing at all costs. But if nothing else, we got a good list coming, so look forward to that. Anyway, these are the worst games of 2020. Terrible year, mediocre games, one incredibly god-awful experience. But 2020's got to be better, right? Right? Well, either way, I'll see you then. Stay healthy, stay safe, and here's to video games. But until next year, peace out, Internet.